Hey everyone, Mercury Steam has worked their asses off to put this fan favorite character into the game, and in my opinion, I think it's paid off. Aneska is a tricky character. Her weapons and ability can be confusing to a lot of people. I aim in this video to comprehensively explain how practically everything about Aneska works, so hopefully anybody can pick her up and play her to her full potential. Anyway, let's get started with the first major part though, Aneska's ability. First things first, don't expect her mech to be some amazing frontline offensive ability or a tank or anything like that. I think its uses extend beyond huge mech that kill shit, because you'll quickly find that it doesn't kill shit, it doesn't do much damage, and it dies quite quickly. But I don't think it's necessarily bad because of that. Instead, especially as a raider, Aneska's mech when summoned is quickly targeted by all nearby mobs and enemies. This has saved my ass countless times. When enemy elite calls an order on me, I'm surrounded by 7 enemies, I put the mech down and it distracts them for a few seconds. I can then shoot the mech to heal it and damage the enemies around it with my AoE weapons at the same time. Overall it works very well. And in PvP, I think it's a little more lackluster. It doesn't shine so much as a PvP ability. It works as a distraction, but enemy raiders can usually just kill the mech in about one shot. So, holding the ability button briefly will summon Aneska's mech on the spot that you called it on. It sits there and attacks enemies that come into its melee range with its quantum microblade. Now this melee doesn't do much damage, but at least the mech has a way to deal some damage when enemies swarm around it. The mech has a health bar, visible in the middle of the screen. You can shoot it with Aneska's weapons to heal the mech, or pick up batteries from fallen enemies, which have a chance to drop a battery if you have damaged it shortly before it died, meaning you don't have to get the last hit on an enemy for it to drop a battery. The mech can also only be summoned when your bar is past the threshold, again, chargeable by picking up batteries by walking over them. When summoned, it has the same HP percentage as the threshold bar, although you can heal it above that. You can hold the ability button again to retrieve the mech at any point, saving its health as it was when you retrieved it. It can be reactivated again immediately with no cooldown, but watch out because retrieving the mech takes a fairly long time. You might have to stand still for a while, so make sure you're safe before you do it. In my opinion, the best uses for the mech is to distract enemies, not kill them. When swarmed by crowds of mobs, the mech can efficiently take all their aggro from you, deal a bit of damage to them, and give you the crucial time to reposition. Healing the mech during its distraction by shooting it also gives you more time, and some weapons even have AoE damage, so you can heal the mech and attack the enemies simultaneously. It's a versatile ability, as there is also no distance limit to how far you can go away from the mech, and it can be retrieved remotely as well. I would say, do not rely on the mech for pure damage. It really doesn't deal that much, but it's still a very useful ability when you need to get out of a pickle, or to defend a particular area. After all, it's simply a free bullet soak, a free damage dealer, and you can control where it sits in the part of the map, but like I said earlier, don't expect it to be that good in PvP because antagonists and raiders alike can destroy it pretty damn quickly depending on the weapon they have. For example, Schneider, his drone, can just fuck up the mech in one shot. The mech does have an extra ability though. Whilst active, if you use the alternate fire button while aiming down the sights, your gun will use one of its shots to fire a smoke marker. The mech will then fire a missile barrage at that area. You can also just press alternate fire without aiming and it will drop the smoke marker at your feet instead. You can do that whilst running and whilst sprinting, and the smoke marker will be behind you. Each of Aneska's weapons changes what the actual missile barrage is, so that'll be the next topic. Let's move on to it. So, with the weapons, Aneska's weapons are a bit of a mixed bag, but I'll go through them one by one to get to the bottom of which one is actually the best and which one's actually utter shite, and it's quite obvious which one is shit because it's the first one. The Atlas G620, or Atlas for short, is Aneska's default weapon, and a replica of the Destroyer of Worlds cannons, apparently being some of the most advanced war technology in the entire galaxy, but that's utter bullshit. The Atlas has 2 shots per clip, and when you fire, it fires a small orb forwards. After a short distance, the orb will stick in midair, in place wherever it is, and starts dealing very small amounts of damage every second. After a short time, it explodes, dealing AoE damage to all nearby enemies. In PvP, anyone with a brain will literally just move away from the floating orb, and in PvE, most enemies just move out of the way anyway. It leaves missions feeling really frustrating as you keep struggling to spend all your time during that mission trying to hit enemies over and over and over, and they just keep moving out the way. There are rare moments where the weapon works, such as you bait all the enemies towards your mech, or enemies are grouped up and stationary, and it does a shit ton of damage and kills like 5 enemies at once. But, you know, the chances for that to happen in a mission, it's only like once or twice, and our other weapons allow you to do that to practically any enemies you come across. You have to wait for the projectile to travel towards them, then you have to wait for the orb to explode, and then you have to reload. It just gets outclassed in terms of damage and usability, and in AoE damage, by Aneska's other weapons, so I definitely recommend to try one of the other two. Now, the alternate fire mode for the Atlas makes the mech shoot a missile barrage, just like in Destroyer of Worlds in the last part of the mission, for example. This is a highlight of the Atlas though, since the missile barrage stumbles enemies that it hit over and over. In PvP especially, it literally just acts as a stun lock for the entire duration, which is actually pretty damn good. I don't think, however, that it properly justifies the normal fire mode of the weapon, which is just too bad in comparison to the benefit you get from the missile barrage. The shots do apply self-damage, and it can be quite a lot if you're standing right next to it, so watch out for your own shots. The missile barrage from the mech also does self-damage and self-knockback, which has got me fucking killed several times on white noise. Please avoid the missile barrage area, make sure you're aiming somewhere away from you, don't make the same mistake I made. Now, for Aneska's other common, the Ionizer K-23 is a lot better than the Atlas. Now this is where Aneska's guns start becoming interesting. This one is a lot simpler. Every shot you hit on an enemy applies ionizing to them. They will glow purple whilst they're ionized, and when you shoot an ionized enemy, they explode, which creates a small AoE explosion and does more damage than the initial shot would have done. The weapon itself has a much longer range. It enables Aneska to fight at medium to long range rather than a default weapon which is locked to close range only. This changes her shooting style to long range engagements and can be a lot more effective in PvP because it rewards accurate aiming, and that's about it really. The alternate fire for this weapon makes the mech create a large ionizing sphere at the smoke marker location, which super ionizes all enemies within. Super ionized enemies that are shot will explode for more damage and can be shot several times. This weapon has no self-damage, except for when you shoot an ionized enemy that's right beside you, but that rarely happens anyway. This is a much nicer weapon for PvP, perhaps. It can work on many larger maps. The cooldown for the ionization with the mech missile barrage is also really low, so you'll have a lot of opportunities to put it on enemies that are behind cover. Overall, I think this weapon's actually pretty damn good, maybe better for PvP and antagonists specifically. Finally, Aneska's rare, currently called the Solaris, but Mercury Steam said they'll rename it to Invicta, is where personally her weapons become amazing, right? The last one was interesting, but this one's amazing. Right, so the weapon has got 4 shots per clip. This is important. It has a fast fire rate, and each shot fires what they call a miniature sun, which can ricochet off of walls twice before it dissipates. Each time it bounces, it changes appearance, like it gets redder, looks more explosive, and that's because it indicates the quality of the explosion that you'll get from it. So, right, here's the trick. If you shoot a mini-sun that has bounced off of a wall at least once, instead of firing another minigun, providing that your crosshair is directly over the bounced one, it will explode. You'll detonate it. This causes a large AoE explosion. What you're supposed to do is to fire the first 2 at a wall, or the floor, or anything really, have it bounce towards an enemy, and then you use the other 2 shots to aim accurately over the bounced suns and detonate them. To do a massive amount of AoE damage. It can down enemies in PvP practically instantly with just one of them. It can kill most mobs pretty damn quickly. I played Aneska antagonist with this weapon, and in one shot alone I could down the enemy raiders, another Aneska, and there was a hive, and it's pretty damn good. The easiest way to bounce the suns though is to fire them at the feet of an enemy, like just in front of them. Then the orb will bounce towards the enemy, and then you can detonate it in front of them, and you can usually one-shot them with just one orb, but maybe if it's higher MMR you might need 2, but overall, yeah. This works for most bosses too, such as Schneider and Double Agent, letting Aneska deal actually somewhat nice damage against bosses too. If it's a bit confusing, like you don't really understand, just watch the video that's playing in the background. You can see that I always aim at the floor in front of an enemy twice, or at least once, and then wait for it to bounce and then shoot the bounced one, and you'll notice that, you know, I'll slow it down for you. As long as your crosshair is directly over a sun that has already bounced, instead of firing another sun, that shot will fire a laser that procs the sun and makes it explode. So hopefully you can see that in the video, because it is quite confusing. It took me a couple games to get the hang of it. As for the missile barrage, this weapon replaces it with what's somewhat reminiscent of Hans' rare weapon, the Worm. It spawns a spherical area of fire, called a solar flare, does very low damage over time. You can shoot the center of the solar flare with your weapon, the same deal. If your crosshair is over the middle, it will shoot the solar flare and increase its size and damage, but it lowers its duration. In my opinion, this solar flare is shite. It doesn't do much damage at all, it deals self-damage, so it doesn't really help you for CQC in PvP, for example. Enemies in PvP can just walk out of it, and enemies in PvE only take like 8 damage even when you've extended it to its maximum size and damage. It's just not as good as the other 2 missile barrages from Aneska's weapons. Now for the weapon builds real quick. The Atlas G620 has Caliber, Quick Fingers, Affiliation, and Bounty Hunter. At higher forge levels, you can simply max the 2 offensive stats, Caliber and Quick Fingers, and put the rest into whatever you prefer, bonus gold or bonus faction points. This is simple enough. The Ionizer K-23 has Caliber, Quick Fingers, Effective, and Treasure Hunter. I would argue that the Ionizer works best with Effective for the critical percentage chance, and Caliber for the bonus overall damage, so you're increasing the damage, and you're increasing the critical hit chance. It still reloads relatively quickly, so I don't think Quick Fingers is really needed, unless you have already maxed out Effective and Caliber. Therefore, my one is built 15, 7, 15 respectively. I would recommend just going for Caliber first if you're a lower forge level, and then going for Effective. Now Solaris, or the Invicta, has Quick Fingers, Hero Killer, Exterminator, and Bounty Hunter. For this one it's a little bit more tricky. I think you do have a degree of difference here. Some people prefer Quick Fingers for the reload speed, because the weapon's reload is really slow. I built mine, however, 7, 15, 15 because I really prioritize the AoE damage that the weapon does, so I just want it to do more damage to the elites and players, and do more damage to the mobs that I'm killing with the AoE anyway. The reload is still pretty slow, and maybe I would have preferred 15 in Quick Fingers, but I think the trade-off of just having so much more damage is worth it to lower Quick Fingers to 7. If you're a lower forge level and you don't have access to 15, 15, 7, then I would recommend just going for Exterminator and or Hero Killer first, whichever one just sounds better to you, more damage in PvP and elites, or more damage to mobs. Alright, now let's get on to the cards for Aneska. Firstly, we'll start with the Hades Division cards. This is a standard deck, so you may just do the same thing that you did with other Hades Division characters. Vitality is a staple good card with a little extra health, but the one I go for is Cold Blood, which shuts off your Aleph meter for 12 seconds after you use a finisher on any enemy, so that's even just killing a little grunt or just an elite or another player. Having the Aleph meter off means you can run around pretty much just hidden, stealthy, even when you've got your mech out and you're shooting a load of shit. Overall quite useful for hiding your presence from AI and Antags alike. Another good card is Spiral of Violence, which increases your weapon damage by 25% for 20 seconds after using a finisher on any enemy. Overall, that's just quite good bonus damage to your weapon. Now let's have a look at Aneska's cards. Thankfully, she only has 20 at the moment, meaning that if you start rolling now, it's going to be easier to get the ones that you want because the pool is a lot smaller. Once they add another like 20 cards to her, it's going to half the chances that you're going to get the card that you want. So I would say roll now while you still can. One of the cards that I've been using for Aneska is Vial of Epinephrine. This one is whenever you pick up an energy cell, you heal for 20 health with a maximum of 40 excess health points. I find that one really valuable because the batteries spawn all the time really, and just that extra 20 health is always useful considering it can overheal you from 140 to a maximum of 180 as well. I find myself picking up batteries all the time on Aneska, so personally I quite like that one. Another good card for her with Raider Affinity is Laminated Armor, which just makes the mech take 30% less damage. That one I tried for a bit, and overall it's not too noticeable, but 30% less damage is 30% less damage. Another card reminiscent of Nurse Doldrun is Life Support, which heals you for 15 health every second as long as you're less than 5 meters away from the mech. I'd say this one's quite useful as well because, it's just extra free healing. Reminds me of the Healing Gate card for Valyria. And finally, another card that stands out from her is Prevail. If your mech is destroyed, you receive healing with an excess health of 150 health points. I consider this one really good as well because your mech dies a lot, but it only takes a minimum of 2 batteries to respawn it. If you play like that and spawn it to use your alternate fire missile barrage, or you spawn it just to like block off an area for a short amount of time and then it dies all the time, and you're noticing that your mech keeps dying, get the Prevail card. You'll get healed for 150 health. It will overheal you for 150 health as well, which is amazing. These cards are not a definitive guide. They're just recommendations. Maybe there's better combinations that other people can think of, but these are the ones that really stood out to me. These are the ones that worked for me when I played as Antagonist and Raider so far. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. I hope I helped with some part of learning about Aneska, particularly her weapons, because especially the Solaris, they aren't explained completely in depth in-game. If you have any more questions, just please leave them in the comments. I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability, and thanks for watching.